My name is Pablo Navarrete. On behalf of Alborada Films and Alborada, I'd like to welcome you to this virtual online premiere of Santiago Rising, the debut film documentary by Nick MacWilliam, my good friend, co-editor of Alborada, a website that we run covering Latin American politics, media, and culture. If you want to know more, go to alborada.net. And Alborada Films is a production company that has been alongside Alborada making films, documentaries on Latin America for more than 10 years now. So I'm delighted that, well, Nick didn't really have too much of a choice whether he could release this via Alborada Films. But I'm delighted that we are releasing this film, his debut film, as I said. Hopefully all of you will have watched it by now on Vimeo. I think some of you, there was a little bit of confusion about how to watch it, but get in touch with us and we'll make sure you do watch it. And there'll be lots of other screenings. If you go to the event section of the Alborada website, you'll see upcoming screenings. We have one on Saturday morning, which is geared to Australia. But you know, for early birds in the UK, you can tell your friends about that. We have one on Sunday, and we've got plenty more in the pipeline. And we'll have longer Q&As for those, because the idea with today is to celebrate the fact that Nick's made his first film. And so I think we should take a moment for those on camera to give him a round of applause. It's not the same as being in a cinema, but I'd encourage as many of you to be on camera. So congratulations, Nick. I know it's, as I said, when I made my first documentary more than 10 years ago, I was told I was reckless by making a film that was 65 minutes as a first film. So Nick's taken that recklessness to another level by making an 89-minute film. So I think he's done an incredible job, really, for his first film, especially. And so really, I think he deserves a lot of praise. So I won't rant on, but just quickly to say that the idea is it's going to be relatively short tonight. I'm going to ask Nick a few questions and then we're going to open it up to you guys. So if you want, you can send questions on the chat to me privately, Pablo Navarrete, or to the group. There is a possibility, if you have a compulsion to say it on camera, that we can unmute you. Someone will unmute you. Obviously, if it's a comment, keep it brief. And obviously, questions are fine. But I'm happy to either read questions out. And so, yeah, what else? Just to say that many of you will know that 25% of the proceeds of tickets today will be going to an organization in Chile working on human rights with the victims of the eye mutilations that the state security services have kind of unleashed on protesters, quite barbaric. So the Ojos de Chile, I think some of them might even be in the audience, and so they'll be receiving a quarter of the ticket proceeds. And yeah, I think that's really it. I don't want to go on really, so I'm going to be brief, Nick. And I guess the obvious question that we all want to know is, why did you make this film? And I mean, I know that you lived in Chile for 4 years, 2010 to 2014. So how did you go from that experience to making this film?
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, good. So before I answer the question, I would just like to say, obviously, thank you to everybody for being here. It's really, really wonderful. And I've had a little glance at the chat. I don't want to read it in too much detail yet. I'm savouring it for afterwards to read it properly. But it seems like it's positive feedback, which is obviously what you want when you've made a film. So thanks for coming. I also really want to thank the incredible team that worked with me, which was obviously Pablo, Marcela, who I hope is here as well, Marcela Villa, who was with me in Santiago, helping, on the ground there. She was living there and did a really good job of helping me. And then, of course, Simon, who I believe is here, my editor, colorist, all-round guru of helping out. So thanks to all those guys. And especially, I really want to thank everybody in Chile who spoke to me in this film, who took part in this film, who kind of was happy to speak to me, who had faith in what I was doing, and help make this a reality. And you know, it was really, really important to me that people in Chile agreed with what I was doing. And obviously, if you turn up somewhere with a camera and there's been a heavy state repression, you kind of it would be normal for people to be suspicious. But you know, there were people who asked me questions, and that was completely reasonable. But the vast majority of people there were really happy that I was doing what I was doing and had complete faith in what I was doing, and were just pleased that there were people, and they were saying, you know, it's really good. We're really happy that you're going to be getting this message out there. People need to know what's happening in Chile. So yeah, massive, massive thanks to people in Chile, and I can't wait to actually get the Spanish version ready to show out there. So yeah, thanks to everybody. Why did I make the film? So as Pablo said, I lived in Chile from 2010 until 2014. In that time, I became quite familiar with a lot of the issues that are covered in the film. You know, obviously Chile has kind of presented itself for a long time as the sort of success story of Latin America in terms of its economic performance, in terms of its kind of like what they could be classed as political stability, aside from obviously the brutal and horrific Pinochet era. But you know, it's been relatively politically stable in that throughout its history. Other than that, and you know, and this is kind of like the public or international image that Chile's often you know had. But living there, I became much more familiar with a lot of the themes that are touched on in the film. You know, I lived there in 2011 when there was a huge student protest movement, which you know, dominated the country. It took over, and that really gave me a sense of perspective around what, you know, what protest is in Chile and what it can be, and the commitment and the dedication and the sheer relentless pressure of Chilean protest. I also became familiar with the Mapuche situation, and also the impunity which continues until today from the dictatorship. So all of these issues were issues I was very familiar with. And I had a plan to go back to Chile in December 2019, and it just so happened that the social explosion occurred a couple of months, well, no, a bit less than that actually, about 6 weeks before I went. And you know, when I go to Latin America, when I travel in general, I always like to do some kind of like journalistic project. So kind of going back to my old home where I hadn't been for 5 years, where I was very familiar with the themes, where I had a lot of good friends. I mean, I couldn't not do this, you know. It was like it had to be done basically, and doing it was a really like, I mean, enlightening and just, you know, inspiring experience. And yeah, it's probably, you know, one of the most memorable things I've done in my life was being in Chile and during those kind of 4 weeks when they were doing that, and just, you know, the love and the joy which existed among everybody, and then compare that with what they're facing, you know, the repression, the hate, the brutality, which is something that's gone on forever in Chile, you know, or well, certainly, you know, since the Pinochet era. You know, it's a very brutal neoliberal system, which obviously I tried to come across in the film, and I want to contrast that with the you know, with the joyfulness and the love that is you know, that feels Chilean protest. So yeah, being there, you know, I've been writing about Latin America and Chile for several years. So being there, it was just kind of, you know, there was no, as I said, there was no question of me not doing this, because yeah, it just had to be done. I just had to do it.
It's a good answer. That's why many films are made, because you have to do them. So, you know, you touched on the kind of the role of, you know, the joy, and I was there in February. So I was there. You filmed this film predominantly in December 2019, sort of 2 months after the protest, kind of the mass protest began. I was there in February of last year, sort of just before the coronavirus kind of hit, and then meant that people had to be, you know, essentially indoors. My parents are both Chilean, and I went back after many years, and I was also struck. It was an incredible, every Friday in Plaza Dignidad, which you chronicle so well, what happens in that square that's been renamed the Plaza of Dignity. The kind of joy, the arts, the celebration, but also then the repression that comes. That idea to really, I think the film really highlights really well the kind of the sort of creative role of protest? And is that something that you were very conscious that you wanted to do because of your interest in the music and the arts? Or was that something that as a filmmaker you just felt was so overwhelmingly obvious that you just had to give it a kind of a big part of, make it a big part of the film?
Yeah, so I think the kind of like that intersection between like political protest and creative expression is very, very strong in Latin America in general. I haven't been to, you know, every country in Latin America, so I couldn't comment on it everywhere. But I mean, everywhere I've been and know reasonably well, the yeah, that kind of where art and politics meets is a special place. You know, it's a place of real expression, and it's, I think, sometimes where the most powerful messages come from. You know, personally, I don't think you could make a film about protest in Chile or about, you know, like resistance in Chile without it having this huge creative element to it. You know, we're going back to the days of, there's a lot of people here who know more about the history of Chile than I do. So, you know, I'm talking from my own personal experience. And I'd love to hear from some people, you know, if they've got any comments to what I say. But Chile's had this tradition going back, well, to the pre-Allende government days, you know, when the you know, the right-wing press, the oligarchic media, etc., wouldn't give a voice to progressive candidates, wouldn't give a voice to social movements. So the arts became fundamental to that. You know, you had the Brigada Ramona Parra, which was the Ramona Parra Brigade, who were street artists who painted these beautiful murals all over Santiago and elsewhere, promoting the socialist message, promoting social justice, promoting human rights. And you'd paint this in like a community, and also, you know, most people, you know, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, their main, you know, kind of media interaction was radio. So if the radio didn't carry you, you know, you kind of, you know, it was quite difficult to get those messages out. So arts and music became fundamental to that. And that's, you know, and as obviously under Allende, that was massively promoted also in cinema, because, you know, Chilean cinema from the 60s and 70s is incredible. And that's probably one of the main things that has got me into really wanting to make my own kind of documentary. So the arts and the music were massively promoted under Allende because they were such fundamental means of promoting his message, promoting socialist politics. And then you had obviously the Pinochet regime, which completely targeted all that sector. You know, the day of the military coup, the army, you know, soldiers went into the various universities, into their film departments, and destroyed everything. You know, because so many students had been engaged under Allende, making projects about what had been going on, etc. So going back to, you know, 50, 60 years, and people here can tell me it's longer. You know, Chile's had this incredible tradition. In the 80s, under Pinochet, you know, there was like underground parties and bands like Los Prisioneros and Electrodomésticos were coming out. And they were playing like these kind of like underground gigs. And that was a massive part of the resistance as well. And then living there, you know, and I moved there in 2010, so 20 years after the dictatorship ended. But there was massive protests. There was big social movements happening while I was there. I mean, which, you know, historically been going on. And, you know, music, art, just fundamental to it. And I just think that music and that art is based, as I've already said, in an outpouring of joy and love. And, you know, the opposite of that is hate, you know. So you know, the people are embracing that joy and what they face, because, you know, if you want to get as rich as possible, you have to have a lot of hate in you, because you have to do hateful things to people. So, you know, so I just think the contrast is perhaps more pronounced through the arts. You know, you see that the police have got their hugely militarized police force, water cannon, tear gas, and people have got trumpets. Man, it's like, you know, it's just the contrast is so powerful.
Yeah, I agree. We've got loads of comments, questions, loads of praise for your film, Nick. So you can read all of that when we save the chat, and I think you'll be very happy to read the positive comments. But they don't, you know, we welcome also, you know, I'm sure you do as well, constructive criticism, and maybe send that in a private email though, not today. I've got a question here from a good friend of Alborada, Grace Livingston, who
Oh, hello, Grace.
we did actually, just to plug, we've done a series of online webinars or meetings. And Grace did our first one where we did an online launch of her book. And so if you go to Alborada online, the first one is a really great sort of presentation that Grace gave on a recent book she's written on the UK's relationship with Chile and Argentina. I highly recommend watching that. So anyway, Grace asks, you kind of talked a little bit about how you became interested in Chile, why you made the film. What's happening with the protests in Chile now, and what is likely to happen in the future?
Okay, this is yeah, sure. So obviously, they've got the convention for the new constitution is due in April this year, or it's taking place in April this year. That's the vote for citizen representatives to take part in it. It's not as perhaps as as simple as we'd all like it to be in terms of just getting citizens on board. Obviously, there's a massive right-wing backlash to prevent this happening. So I mean, the struggle just to get to that point, has been immense. But then to get to, I think, to be honest, I haven't been that connected with Chile recently because I've, working full time, making this film, everything going on here. So I think there's probably people, participating in this event who could give a much better answer than I could.
Okay.
Hold on, sorry. But in terms of kind of like the human rights stuff, that's just, I mean, there's been no let up. I mean, just last week, I covered the Mapuche situation in that case, and there was one of the news reports that I included covered the case of Camilo Catrianca, who was a farmer shot dead while, by the police in November 2018. And just last week was the trial of the police officers accused of his killing. And, his wife, his mother, his daughter, his 7-year-old daughter, on their way to the courthouse, were all pulled over by the police and detained and stopped. And there's pictures in Chilean press of a 7-year-old girl being pinned down by a police officer. At the same time, they launched a massive assault on the community that he's from. So there's been this massive backlash, simply because the police are actually being held to account to some small degree over the brutality they've inflicted on the Mapuche population. So in terms of the human rights, Chile's invested massively in its, military apparatus since then. In terms of, it's got a whole new series of, the Guanaco, the water cannon trucks. We've got the green ones there. They've got these super flashy white ones now. So there's not really been any let up in the human rights situation, as far as I can see. I mean, I'd welcome comments from people who are more up to date. One thing I would say, and I think that for me was very informative and educational about being out there, was that something like, getting that constitutional vote. I think people out there, I always felt that they were looking at that. That's the beginning. We get that, and that's the beginning of what we're doing. And I think we needed, elections, or however you want to, if you want to implement transformative change in Britain or somewhere, getting a kind of political representation in power that's going to do that, that's the beginning, not the end. And I think that's an important lesson, just you get in, but that's where it starts, and that's when the real struggle begins. So, I say this is a situation that's going to go on for a very long time. And also COVID obviously doesn't help, massive street mobilizations. And COVID, as we've seen, is a massive boon to right-wing political forces, to the political establishment. We've seen huge transfer of wealth from normal people to the elite. We've seen massive shutdown of worker rights, including in Chile. They're using it to pass all kinds of legislation all over the world, which makes it easy to fire people, which reduces their pay, their conditions, and so forth. So yeah, I think if there's anywhere that has the commitment and the stamina to keep this going forever, or for as long as it takes, it's Chile. I've never quite been anywhere like it in terms of stamina involved in protest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the key things perhaps in Chile now is that there's a certain fear that's been lost, a fear that was very much, understandable post, a country that was subjected to sort of US-sponsored fascism, state terrorism, which, brutalized the country and made people very fearful. And I think a real watershed moment has been passed in terms of a new generation that's lost fear. And so even despite the sort of quite horrific continued state repression. So we're just hearing that unfortunately our Zoom has capped us at 100, which is very, very annoying given that we have people trying to get in and we have got the capacity in theory to go higher. But anyway, that we'll deal with that after. There's a really good question actually that I just saw from Yadi Perez Marin, which was one that I wanted to ask, but it's better. She says, I'm curious about your process as a first-time filmmaker. What did you find most challenging about the experience? Or perhaps could you share with us some of the things that surprised you the most as you were making the film? And before you answer that, Nick, I just want to also say that we'll be doing lots of Q&As, lots of screenings, longer Q&As with different panelists. We've got one on Saturday chaired by Rodrigo, an academic journalist, Chilean heritage, with Carol Concha, journalist based in Cambridge, who's writing a lot on Chile as well. So you can, join those, and there'll be lots of debate around what lies ahead for Chile and the prospects for progressive change. So yeah, in terms of the filmmaking process, Nick, do you regret trying to embark on this project? And yeah.
No, I definitely don't regret it. In terms of the filmmaking process, well, Pablo, you said that 89 minutes was bold. Was that the word you used? I mean, it would have been 3 hours long if it had been just up to me. Thankfully my various friends who've got a bit more experience in filmmaking showed me the benefits of reducing it. But perhaps the director's cut will.
Yeah, someone's asked about a director's cut, so you can.
Oh really? Oh God, I can't think about that now. But yeah, potentially one day. Potentially not. Maybe soon. So yeah, well, I mean, aside from the technical things, which caused me a lot of difficulty, because Santiago is so bright in December. It's so sunny and so hot and so bright. So even just like the basic things, like getting my camera to, like adjust between, there's all kinds of things like that. I mean, it was surprisingly not that many challenges aside from the technical side of things, I mean, going around the city, there was just stuff happening everywhere and everybody had a story. I mean, so many people wanted to talk. So some people didn't want to talk, which is completely understandable, because they're facing intense repression. People have been arrested over social media videos, detained, and, some of the political prisoners are over social media videos and stuff like that. But I mean, generally, people were enthused to talk. They wanted to say what they were happening. And I think a lot of people in the film approached me, they see me filming and they want to speak and they just wanted to give their views. So that element of it was really, that was kind of like something that I really benefited from, the fact that everybody had a story, everybody had a view, everybody had something to say about the government or about the situation. I completely understood that some people didn't, but like I got, on the bus with the guys going to the funeral, I mean, I was at the thing the night before. Sorry, it wasn't the night before. The funeral was on the Tuesday. So on the Saturday, the attack on where they're holding the wake for Mauricio Fredes, and the police destroyed it. I just spoke to his cousin that day, and I said, look, can I come and film the funeral because, I'm doing this and I want to show what's happening. And they were just like, yeah, of course. So I just went, got there, got on the bus, and everybody was just like, I'm like, they don't know who I am, but they were just so open to me and like, they saw me as an ally and I was an ally. So that was like a really kind of eye-opening part. I guess I also learned that the police don't care if you've got a camera; they'll still shoot you with a water cannon. Because that was Yeah, I mean, they don't care if you're press. I mean, I was holding a camera like that, I was quite clearly what I was doing. Perhaps that made me more of a target. It definitely felt that day when they when they destroyed the memorial. It definitely felt they were trying to destroy my camera as well because they didn't want it to get out. So, you know, there were challenges, but generally people were very supportive. And considering what you know, the US and European countries have done in Latin America, and obviously, you know, you know, I look like I'm from that part of the world. You know, people were very much kind of open to what I was doing, and that was really inspiring as well.
There's a question by Karen Fletcher. Were you scared being faced with the violent police tactics? Because as you say, they don't really discriminate. But before you answer, I was there in February, and what struck me, I'd never, you know, my parents, you know, political exiles from the Pinochet dictatorship, and I've never lived there, and I've been there a couple of times, and I've made documentaries in Colombia, Venezuela, other parts, never in Chile. And it's the first country where I've had people scared to be on camera. And I've made 3 films in Colombia in the midst of, you know, paramilitary sort of neoliberalism, and so it really struck me that people were, you know, wanting pixelated faces, voice distortion, because they were genuinely frightened about what the state security services would do to them. And the second thing was that in Plaza Dignidad, by February, I think there was already a kind of sense of outrage at the mainstream media, how it had covered the uprising, and the international media. And I think there was certainly a hostility to people with cameras. And so you had to be very much vouched for if you were going to just kind of go into the middle of Plaza Dignidad with a camera and, you know, start filming, because there was even, you know, the drones. Some people film over Plaza Dignidad with drones, and you know, people use lasers to bring them down, media drones, because of the hatred towards the mainstream media. Obviously, understandably, because of the historic role they played in undermining Allende and facilitating Pinochet. So there's a question about, were you scared? Yeah, there's a question about, were you scared? And also John Barnes, who has to leave, has a comment. One thing that stands out is the gap between the popular demands and the political system. With the onset of the Constituent Assembly and the constitution process, greater attention is likely to be paid to the possible links between the popular movement and progressive political forces seeking to take the demands forward within the institutions under pressure to reform. Would the gaps and links be an interesting thing to explore in a follow-up film? Someone else has asked whether you're going to be making a follow-up film, and thanks you and for making the film. So were you scared because of the police tactics and a bit of a bigger, will you be making another film?
Well, I'm kind of familiar with police tactics in Chile, having lived there for 4 years and having gone on the marches, having gone on all the, you know, the student marches, the Mapuche marches, the 11th of September marches, which is the anniversary of the coup. And every single time the police, you know, are repressive. They're systematically, institutionally, it's a repressive institution, and it's, you know, that's what they do. You know, it's guaranteed every time. So I was kind of familiar with that, but I still wasn't quite prepared for the sheer level of force and violence being employed by the police in Chile at this stage. The funny thing is, when you're filming, you kind of feel a bit disconnected, you know, because you're so focused on that that, you know, you almost feel like you're in a kind of bubble or something. So I wouldn't quite say I felt scared. There was a couple of moments that were pretty hairy, especially with the horses. I don't know if you remember the bit in the film with the horses. Well, I was just on a pavement filming and heard and looked up, and they were just charging in 2 rows directly towards me. And the only thing I could do was freeze and stay completely still, because if I tried to move either direction, which would be a natural reaction, I would have most likely gone under the hooves of these police horses. There I was with a big camera. Well, the camera's not big, but the thing I'm holding is quite big. Quite clearly, you know, doing that. So that was kind of like the worst moment. There are other moments, but perhaps not quite scary. But like, as I say, at one point in the film, you're kind of worried about your camera getting soaked and losing all your footage and things like that. I mean, you have to wear like these kind of eye stuff and a helmet as much as possible, because they're shooting well, there's stuff about the eyes, but they're shooting pellets or whatever they are, ball bearings, tear gas canisters at head height, into crowds of people, just haphazardly, like indiscriminately, just into crowds of people. It's just brutal. It's horrific, and that's why you've got more than 400 people who've had eye injuries. In terms of making another film, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to go back to Chile and make another film. I don't know when that's going to be possible. My dream is to basically show this film in the restored Centro Arte Alameda, in the Alameda Arts Center. Hopefully they're fixing it. My guy Gustavo, who's in the film, he just messaged me a minute ago to say they're working on it. So
that segues into a question by Pablo, another friend of Alborada. Hi Pablo, another Pablo. Brilliant film, really inspiring. Have you stayed in touch with the people at the Alameda Cultural Center that was burnt down? Do you know what has happened to that space since?
I don't actually. I stay in touch with them, but I've been so busy. We've not chatted much recently. I'm sure somebody here can tell us. So yeah, I'd love to. I know, like, that place is like an institution in Santiago. When I lived there, I was there all the time. Like, films, gigs, just for a coffee, just to hang out. It's a wonderful space, and the fact that it became this kind of medical center. All the medical people are there voluntarily. It was inspiring. It was beautiful, and that was one of like the main centers for that. And you can see by the reaction of people how incensed everybody was, how saddened everybody was, because it's more than just a venue. It's a place of community. It's a place of togetherness and a place of resistance. And I've seen some incredible bands there. Watched some really brilliant documentaries by young Chilean emerging filmmakers, always with social themes involved, political themes involved. So I'm not actually quite sure how far they've got with it, but I'm I know there's massive support to get it back up and running again. But I mean, the destruction, you saw the destruction. I mean, wow, it's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we, as I said earlier, the idea was to be a bit short, a bit brief today. I mean, there's loads of questions. I'm not going to, and I think we're going to take two more today. We're filming this, we're recording this Q&A, and we will release it in the next couple of days on the Alborada Films Vimeo page and across social media, so people can listen back. But there is a good question from Chris P. Are you planning to screen in Chile? What reaction has there been so far in Chile from people who featured in the film or the media? Also plans for the Spanish, for the version for Chile. And there was an interesting question from Clara Ministral. Did you consider including the views of people who oppose the protest movement in order to get different perspectives on the issues addressed in the film? Or was the project always going to be focused exclusively on those pushing for change?
Okay, in terms of showing it in Chile, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the number one priority. I mean, obviously, like, it's different showing it here because people here are going to probably know less about what's happening in Chile. So, I mean, I made the film from the perspective that anyone or that someone who doesn't really know anything about Chile can watch it. And that's why it was important in the beginning, in the first part of the film, to establish the feminist movement, to establish the Mapuche movement, to establish the student movement, the independent media, the dictatorship victims, and so on. That's why I needed to encompass all of these kind of different social movements. But yeah, no, I'd love to. I'd really love to show it in Chile. I've already been speaking to the people in the Villa Francia. They were so kind, allowing me to film Anna Tijoux, who's a superstar. She's a Latin American superstar, and she just goes into another lesson, I think, for politics here. What superstar musicians just go and play on a stage set up in a street in like Tower Hamlets or in South Liverpool or in Moss Side or this area Villa Francia is that is that equivalent in Santiago. So the access that people gave me and like the kind of, I think there's some stuff in the film as well that is pretty damning of the Chilean state, and particularly around the Mauricio Fredes case. And yeah, I mean, I want to obviously, like, it's really important for me that Mauricio's family can see it. I mean, it's brutal what happens, but the solidarity that emerged from that, and I'm sure there's other cases as well. was a beautiful thing, and that was why the funeral scene was also so important. So short question.
Yeah.
Absolutely want to show it in Chile, and we will be organising several online screenings, and I'll hopefully one day be able to go to, I'd love to go back there and show it in person, as I said already. In terms of speaking to people who opposed the movement, like the environment I was in was basically the protests, and I wasn't really wanting to tell that story. I think kind of the mainstream, there's a lot of places you can go to find that kind of message, which opposes popular unity, which opposes social justice. And, the place I was in was not about that. I think one thing about this Chilean movement is, it is massive, and people see it perhaps not as a left and right thing, although there's obviously huge left-wing influences there in so much of the art and the political demands. But it is a case of the people against the oligarchy, and obviously the people are the vast majority. So, the demands are like, you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about decent housing, you're talking about having enough to eat. This should not be a left or right issue. This is just an issue. This is an issue that everybody feels, unless they're wealthy. So I didn't feel that there was a contrasting perspective in that sense.
Yeah.
But obviously, like, the people who I spoke to were coming from a lot of them were coming from a certain political background, and a background that I sympathise with and that I support. But it was never for me. It was not a case of trying to be objective and get the two sides story, because I don't think there is a story from the other side. As I said already, if you support that kind of system that they have in Chile or elsewhere in many other countries, including in Britain, or it's a system built in hate, and that's not something that I think needed to be covered in this film. I think it came across in what we saw from the state.
Yeah, no, I think it's fully. I've had that question before. I think it's fully justified. Like when some people talk about balance, that in a way a film like this is the balance to a narrative that is so overwhelmingly one-sided on so many issues, which is so skewed to the right when it comes to offering perspective. So I think that I think it's fully justified. But yeah, equally though, that you could also, I've done films where I've without pretending, without doing that kind of objectivity, that fake objectivity thing about not knowing and presenting both sides, and not offer. I think you offer a stance, but then you can also anyway. But that's a bigger discussion. I think we've gone nearly a quarter of an hour over. Carmen says there isn't such thing as an objective documentary. Congratulations on making a film that clearly supports the plea of the oppressed without becoming a political pamphlet. Kind of feel that on that note, that's a good note to end.
That's really nice. Thanks very much.
Very nice comment. And so I think, we're going to end. I'd urge you to stay in touch with Alborada. As I say, we'll put this Q&A up online. We hope we can sort of look at forms of debate. I think the film's website is up or about to be ready or about to be launched, and that will be a hub for hopefully people staying in touch with the issues. And so people can email us, info@alborada.net, and we'll be doing lots of other screenings. We'll have the music again for 10 minutes when we leave, so we can everyone can enjoy that. But I just want to once again congratulate Nick for a very impressive first film, and I think there is a clap function. There is someone knows how to do it. I don't.
Yeah, everyone was muted on the first clap, so I just have to assume everyone was like screaming as well.
If we were in a cinema, the applause would be overwhelming.
This is going to be another benefit of hopefully one day going back to actual venues.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you so much, Nick, for making this film. It's going to be
again, thanks to everyone for coming, and please do support the film, because obviously this is a completely self-funded and independent film, but obviously the team everyone deserves to be paid for their labour, so the team's all it's about supporting the team, and obviously, like, we're using these events also to support organizations in Chile as well, and also please tell people about the film, because I would like to get it shown as far and wide as possible.
Yeah, and get in touch with us, because, as I say, like, these films provoke discussion, and I think extricating myself from the fact that my parents are Chilean, I think the Chilean case, what's happened in Chile, is so important, given that neoliberalism, as they say, neoliberalism was born in Chile, and hopefully it will die in Chile and elsewhere. And I think there's so many important conversations around what's happening and what has happened in Chile that transcend the Chilean case and are relevant to people in the UK, in the US, anywhere, fighting for social justice and progressive change. So get in touch, and we'll look at how to make these conversations, take them to where you want them to go. So thanks, Nick. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. I appreciate the kind words.
See you soon.